And I will make this tiny. Okay. Hello, good afternoon. I'm Anna Croyle. I'm the Data Visualization and Reporting Specialist for Institutional Research. So what I do is I take data and turn it into usable information and dashboards. So today's workshop is about exploring the current institutional research and assessment dashboards. So we will introduce them a little. Probably most of you are familiar with them, and then we'll take a little time to go through some sample data questions that can be answered. And this will be a good time for you to ask questions, get feedback, and for me to get feedback as well. So I'll set up the available resources. We'll be splitting up into a few sample questions. And then this is to my benefit as well. We'll brainstorm some better dashboards and solutions. So since these dashboards are really in kind of a pilot stage and they're continually being worked on, this is a good time for you as well if there's something you want to see or something that would be very helpful for your role. So a quick summary of where to find the dashboards. The links are all on the institutional data website, which links to a Google Doc. And from there, you can find summaries and links of all the Tableau dashboards. Any questions at this point about where to find them? And I'll walk us through it as well as we set up. Okay. So to start us off, I have a sample data question that I will walk through to find the number of graduates for the 2021-2022 academic year. And as we're doing that, looking at the kind of trends we can explore. So I will take us straight from the beginning. You can always go to the institutional research homepage, and that will always lead you to the dashboard. So institutional research and assessment. We're interested in institutional data since dashboards are part of that data. And these links all link to different aspects of the dashboards, all in this Google Doc. So remember our sample data question, the number of graduates. So I would go to the graduates dashboard link. Takes me right to that link. I'll open it up. And some of you may have explored these before, some of you haven't, so I'll walk us through some of the terminology. So I just made it full screen, so it's a little bit easier to see. At the top here, we have navigation between different aspects of graduates' data. For example, looking at by department. Each sheet also has filters, so you can look at different aspects of the data you're interested in. This is really one of the main benefits of using interactive dashboards, that allows you to zoom in as much as you want, aggregate, disaggregate, look at the intersections of the data as you need. And if there's something you want to see about graduates that isn't here, you can also always contact me. Okay, so the question we were interested in is the overall number of graduates. And we can see broken down by the type of degree here, but we can also see a total number. So it looks like this was our total for 2021 to 2022. All right, so to summarize, we went from the website, we went to the document, which I see there's people on, and then we explored a dashboard on Tableau. And what kind of trends did we see? I forgot to ask that. So we can see trends across time. Unsurprisingly, there's a little bit of decline, but I mean, we'll see it staggered, of course, too, with the effects of COVID. We can break it down by demographics if we want, if we're interested in trends by gender, for example. URM status, you can see an increasing number of URM graduates over the last 10 years. So that's one example of a kind of exploration we could start looking at graduates. So now for a good chunk of the workshop, I'll be setting aside time for you to explore a sample data question. And when you return, we'll discuss the findings. So it looks like we have 3 people online and 1 in person. So at the end of the 10 minutes, you can discuss the number of students enrolled, finding related data that interests you, and making a note of something to share, either about the trends in enrollment, demographics, or just the dashboard itself. And I'll be here for the 10 minutes, of course, so feel free to put something in the chat or unmute yourselves if you have any questions. Do you have any questions before we get started on that time? All right, in that case, I'll say at 2:20, we'll check back in. Let me know if you have any issues finding a graduate dashboard. And I'll be here if you have any questions. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes, so about half the time, but looks like a small group, so we can tailor it as needed. How are you feeling online? Are you still exploring, or do you want to? I think Liz is good to go. And how are you doing, Alana?
I'm doing okay. I was actually, I kept looking up too much stuff.
Oh no, that's a good input.
But it's really cool. It's really cool to see that the granularity that you can see pretty quickly on this.
Mm-hmm. Great. Would more time be helpful, or are you?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So lots to explore. Anything that stuck out in particular in terms of enrollment trends, or just things about the dashboard that stuck out to you?
I mean, I just like being able to click through all the things and see them and think about why they might be.
I was happy to see that your major numbers are accurate, unlike what the registrar sends me.
Oh.
Because they never count the second major, like people who double major. So it's really frustrating because when we had our program review this year and our reviewers met with the provost, he had the registrar's number of our majors, which was about 10 off.
Oh.
So that was kind of like, I mean, I'm sure I felt really bad for him because like he did a great job and they were like, but actually the report says X. And I was like,
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like there maybe it'd be great to have the registrar use your dashboard because I just got it again and I sent them an email asking them about it. So it was kind of neat to see the granularity and like what you can see credits and like minors over time for graduation rates. Because there you really start seeing, it looked like you could really see, I don't know if you have this experience too, Liz. We have a few people who end up doing 5 years, right? Or they're like transfer students and they do like a shorter year. So you can really see the fluctuation in the graduation rates there. It's kind of cool because like we're a small program. So
Right.
Yeah, we also have, I mean, it's not uncommon for students not to declare economics until their junior year.
yeah.
Even at the very beginning of their senior year, they can actually, particularly if they've taken a lot because they've liked it, and then they just finish up the requirements. So yeah, so that's very helpful.
Yeah, you can really see the transfers in, right, Liz?
Yeah, you can. And it's very different from some of the majors out there where students matriculate in and don't necessarily change in their 4 years.
Yeah, those double majors, they get you.
But it's cool to see the transfer in like in the patterns, right?
Right. And it's really important to have those numbers because double majors still need to meet all the requirements. And so in terms of the seats you're offering and the resources you have to offer seats and the frequency of offering core courses and all that, this data is really important to have.
Awesome. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, so my next plan was to present a series of basically example data questions that you could explore and find through the dashboards. But it looks like we have a small group online, so we can really tailor it to your data questions if you have anything particular. I'll show you what I have, and you can say, like maybe I want to look at other stuff. So my next one was about full-time faculty, looking at faculty rank and demographics in addition. Is that a good starting point for y'all, or should we switch directions?
No, I think that's cool. I mean, we absolutely try to monitor how many faculty per student and like how many credit hours we're doing. So this is the right direction for us.
Yeah, it's good information for the library too, as we figure out which librarians work with which departments and how many faculty members does that mean they're talking to, and
right.
how many students are in that major, and yeah.
Yeah, something that is missing currently that should be added soon is the faculty to student ratio. So I don't believe you'll find that on there.
Yeah, and also actually it's like student FTE per faculty. Is that's always economics and anthropology tend to lead the college in student FTE per faculty member in terms of students served. So, yeah, I know. We're always looking for that number because it makes us look really good. We'd like a pretty colorful chart of that number. That shows how awesome we are.
But everyone will know it was us, Liz.
Well, you know, I mean, do we care? Probably not.
Okay, so I'll say maybe another 5 minutes of exploration for faculty and we can chat more.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Where
Please
are
go ahead.
librarians in this?
Good question. They're not on the faculty one. They should be, there's an instructional like faculty and staff dashboard and a non-instructional one. I'll be honest, I think it should be under the non-instructional, but I am not 100% on how that is structured. We could take a look together. Let's see. So let's go to our handy doc. So we've got faculty and staff. And you're right, I don't think it would be specifically split it out by library staff because the faculty and staff summary is just an overall summary. It doesn't have much of that breakdown.
Right. Well, there's also a distinction within the library because there are library staff members, but librarians are faculty, despite the fact that we don't teach semester courses.
Gotcha. That's a good question. I will.
Yeah, I would think even in the instructional faculty, you should make a tab for librarians separate from class, SOE, SCE, and all of that. I would think in as you go forward in design, because the librarians also like this FT faculty is useful when I think about like, for example, there's a couple departments that are changing potentially FA representation based on the movement of FTE faculty. So knowing that, including the library. So the library is treated just like faculty. Their FTE faculty determines their faculty assembly representation.
Gotcha. Library FTE. Thank you. This is the exact kind of feedback that is so helpful for me.
Actually, on Liz's point, I have a question too. Like, when you're counting, so what I see here is full-time instructional faculty, right? And then you have another thing that shows faculty and staff. Now, some of the staff are teaching little classes now.
Right.
Are they
Well,
counted?
a lot of non-instructional staff are actually teaching.
Which, I mean, I'm not thrilled about that, actually.
Yeah, I know.
Very, very specific ideas about that, but I'm just wondering if they get counted, you know? Like library, it makes sense. I mean, some of the others, it doesn't make sense to me, but.
Yeah, I don't know how you count student affairs professionals that are teaching sections of GST 104.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Does that get counted?
I don't actually know where they are. Where are they?
All good questions. I assume they would, I mean, they're still non-instructional.
They're not instructional by,
but,
kind of by
yeah.
designation. And then, and I'll just say, sometimes the GST 104 is negotiated as part of on load in their regular duties and performance program, but sometimes they just teach it as an extra service as the,
Right.
Per credit hour base rate. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point too, because it'd be good to see like, it sounds like the growth in credit hours taught by non-instructional.
I would definitely want to see that, right, Liz?
Right.
I would, but I would see, it's interesting when I was playing around with your faculty and staff dashboard, it's actually we have more, even after with the COVID and the hiring, we have more full-time faculty than we actually did in like 2014. I was just looking at this dashboard.
Do we
Um,
really?
You know, I think there's a story told about, faculty, but when you actually look at this, so for example, full-time instructional, right? You look in 2014, there's 333. Right now we have 337. So it's
But what's counting
actually,
there?
huh? Well,
What's
full-time
counting?
instructional faculty would be VAP, tenure track tenure, right? Or full-time lecture, instructor appointment, right? So part-time would be our adjunct faculty. So it's just adjunct faculty. Well, part-time instructional faculty has fallen from 226 to about 198. If we look in this 10-year window, full-time instructional faculty was actually at 316 in 2012, and it's gone up to 330. It's peaked, it's gone up, and then it went back down.
Mhm.
But I think there's a story about how these things have dropped or changed in different ways that isn't really borne out by this data. There's an impression, right?
Right.
And the other impression is, we note that we're down. You look at the instructional, non-instructional staff altogether, and you can see we're at 974, which is a low point in the sample, but actually most of that decrease is the non-instructional. So there's a lot of professional staff positions that have kind of been held empty. Would be since COVID, really since 2020, if we look at this.
Right. Definitely
Right,
more
there's 50,
areas.
right, there's non-instructional full-time, there's 50 fewer, and there's like 14 fewer for faculty for instructional.
And now I'm like super curious where the library is in all of this, because the librarians are at about half staff of where we were in 2013. So like, who got those lines?
Well, that is the
Biology,
question, right?
biology got those lines. The answer is usually biology, Emily.
Yeah. I mean, I was about to say we were like, yeah.
Or chemistry. That would be the other two.
Interesting.
But I would like to be able to see the library in these things.
Yes. Yes. I will update it with.
Librarians
out.
are like the Generation X middle child. You just forget you're there. It's just, I know. I'm sorry, Emily. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna go cry in a corner now.
I know, but no one's gonna know because you're like the Gen X middle child.
Hey.
Well, that's why I'm telling you.
As a Gen X middle child, I'm feeling the feels for you right now, Emily. I know.
Ah,
So yes, I'll look into that and I'll follow up with you, Emily, when it is updated.
But that's okay.
Thanks.
And Anna, that's not really a hit on you. This happens like so
No.
often.
No,
They
I know.
everyone forgets us.
Right. They commissioned a
I get
ridiculous
you.
amount of money for a salary study and they forgot about the library. Like no one told them to put the librarians in the faculty
no.
equity study. And
Yeah, it's
well,
great.
that was the least horrifying thing about the study, by the way.
Oh,
we
dear.
could do a whole 50-minute presentation on that. But
I would love to see it. That's like econ put to use, right?
oh, it's like, and we're
Do
gonna
the-
use the average. I'm like, you're gonna use the average. It was so awful. It was because like anyway, equity earnings studies have a pretty solid methodology that's widely accepted, and this consulting firm just ignored it completely. In fact, it was Deb Furlong at Institutional Research that repaired it and turned it into something we could live with. But anyway, the library was forgotten then too. So we're just...
No, but thank you. No, it is really helpful because other people can look at the dashboards for 5 minutes and notice things that I would never think of. So
It is, and it's in SUNY library or faculty. In other systems, it's not. Which is where I think some of that comes in.
Right.
And like in the PASHI system, they're considered staff, or sometimes they're considered faculty, but they have a 10-month and not a 12-month appointment. It can be very.
Yeah, we exist in a strange in-between state.
all right. So that seemed like a good jumping off question then. The last one I have is about program enrollment, which it sounds like some of you may have already explored. So if you'd like to continue exploring, looking at majors, minors, online programs, etc., in an area that is relevant to you or not, and look at those kinds of data trends or things that you would like to see.
I did actually have a question because I was looking at
Go for it.
So like the anthro numbers seem like great. I mean, like from what I could see, it was really interesting. I can't explain the trend, but I mean, except for COVID, but it's cool to see. But I did actually have a question about the graduate program because that's just a terminology
Sure.
question. I don't know. So I noticed that there's like a 7% increase in certificates, right?
Are you
And-
under, go ahead.
Yeah. So like, what does the certificate thing mean versus like master's and certificate? Like, are they calculated separately? This is the grad program when I was looking at grads.
Gotcha.
Undergraduates, like I know I'm going back to graduates, not like program.
Okay, gotcha.
I was just curious because like I don't understand that terminology, I guess. Did you see that, Liz? I didn't. So we have certificate programs and
Right.
grad.
Yes.
Well, we have certificate programs that they're often post-master study. So there's certificates of advanced study, post-masters, like, and for people like, there's certificates like particularly for educational leadership. So people that already have their master's.
Okay.
Right.
That's
So
what that is. Because
but
I was
there
like,
also,
how is
we
that
also
counted?
have, there are certificate programs that are less hours than a master's degree. I think there's some in SCMA,
Oh, okay.
like in design, graphic design, maybe. Is there a certificate program or, so, yeah.
Right,
Yes,
HBW.
I
Okay.
see what you're asking.
Okay, I see that now. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I did
No,
not.
you're good. And I don't have a great answer to it because I don't know all the, oh, there you go. There's a grad certificate also in health promotion wellness. I don't know all these certificate programs or quite understand, when it's like sometimes they're postgraduate or like post baccalaureate. That might be a good thing to help define on the dashboard if it's sticking
Yeah,
out
I
to
was just curious because
people.
when I was
Mhm.
looking by department, I was like, I don't know what this
Right.
is. I could see a bunch, and then I was kind of like, I guess you can look under the program, and then you can select masters, right? When you look undergraduate and look at masters, then it'll tell you all the master's programs, right?
Yes, these are the masters, bachelors. So yeah, majors and minors. I guess the certificates are not on this dashboard.
I didn't realize we had. So is HCI counted as computer science?
It is under that department, yes.
Okay, so that's why it's so huge. All right, that makes sense.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no, of course.
I did not understand what I was looking at. Now I do. Thanks.
No. So feel free to ask questions about programs or graduates or anything else.
Where are my students, Anna? Where are they? They're gone.
Yeah, they're all gone.
I know, where did they go? Oh.
Your programs, is that it, Liz?
Yeah, majors are probably half of where they were in 2012, with the drop off really starting at around COVID time. So I mean, part of it is the number of majors has fallen for just about everybody because enrollment is down, right?
Mhm.
But our decrease is a bit more precipitous, I think.
I thought I was just looking at department and now I can't find it. So the top part of the when you're looking at departments, majors and minors, those are credit hours.
department.
Oh, no, those are students, right? In the majors and minors for all of class, right?
Yes, head counts.
Head counts. I got you. Okay. So we can actually trace the trends of class over time, obviously, just like this trend line.
Mhm. Sorry? Oh, yes, you're right. It is. Yeah, so many acronyms. It's hard to keep them consistent. Okay, so explore for a few more minutes and then I'll transition us into brainstorm time because I want to get your feedback while we're here together.
So I have another question.
Mhm. Go ahead.
I'm just, with tomorrow being the start of Pride Month, and I'm noticing only male and female in these gender statuses.
Yes. Yes, that is a great question. So SUNY recently-ish is going to include a gender X. So that will be included in all the upcoming data for students, applicants, and I assume faculty. So that option, like that third option will be there. It's not the, of course, full gender identity.
But it would help, yeah.
All right,
Cool.
it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't. You're pointing out a good point here that the data only captures a aspect of students and it captures it in these predefined boxes.
It is,
So-
and even now in the two boxes, it's also self-identified, right? So
Yes.
we are, students who identify as female, check female.
Which is good. I
Yeah,
just
no, I
worry
agree.
about the students who
Right.
don't identify as
No,
either.
it is. It's a problem in SUNY, but I'll tell you, Emily, it's even like a lot of bigger problem too in federal data.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
like earning studies by sexual orientation are very hard to do because some of the best
Mm.
data sets for them don't get it
Mhm.
managed, right? So, yeah.
Yes, Emily, good question. So you should be seeing a gender X in probably the next update of the dashboards.
Cool, thanks.
Good question. All right, so we have about 13 minutes left. I think that's a good point to go back to brainstorm. So I know this is a lot of information at once, but if you could take a few minutes to think about the kind of data that's not here, the kind of data that would be useful for you, and the kinds of questions that could be answered by institutional data that you have. So we already talked about why are librarians not mentioned here? Stuff like that is great. And even bigger, something like we could use a sort of dashboard like this for program review. It'd be good if we could just check on it to see how things are going. So I'll say 4 minutes, or you can share now if you're ready. And then we can talk a little.
I'm wondering if we have a dashboard that helps give us like student success indicators, because I know in meetings with Debbie, she's kind of collected of, what's the probability of you having a disqualifying GPA at the end of the semester if at least one of your mid-term grades, or at least if you have one starfish alert for one
Right.
course or things like that. That's probably a little too granular for a dashboard. But I wonder if we collect data that gives us some, I don't know, call them success checkpoints or things like that, that can help, can help faculty see, we actually know, and you'd almost have to blend a few years for this to be useful, I think.
Right.
Anyone, to understand that if a student is at this point, by week 8 or 9, right, then, we have some risks here. What can we do? And it would be a good infographic for people to kind of check about what they should be looking for, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Student success checkpoints. Yeah. Thank you. In person, they said drop, fail, or withdraw rates by department.
Do we collect data about languages that students speak?
I don't know. I've never seen any, but
we would have that. They can self-identify, but they also ask for waivers from the from the language requirement based on fluency in another language. So there's a couple points where you can collect that data.
In what context would you be interested in seeing that, Emily?
It's a thing I've been thinking about with the library, and like what in the perfect world where we had, all the money to spend, what languages would we collect in, and what languages would our signage be in to make students feel welcome and included, and things like that.
Right. Yeah, it's a really cool idea I've never thought of.
It's also, in terms of the things you prepare for our lobbying efforts, saying that, you're further educating this large bilingual population, preparing for this global workforce. I think that can be a selling point to kind of the economic benefits of SUNY campuses across the state.
That is a nice spin.
It's the economic spin.
Yeah, we have so much on like geographic origin, but
right. But I think, I think, Emily, like a lot of our downstate students could be bilingual. Right.
Oh yeah. And I hear students talking in other languages all the time as I walk around. So like clearly they're here, they're speaking other languages comfortably.
Right.
also it would be useful from the point of view of like, would it be worth us seeking out people to hire who speak those languages?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they have a grant in for Asian language instruction here on campus, Emily. I don't know if they're going to get it.
But even beyond that, right? If you are having a terrible day and English is not your first language, wouldn't it be much nicer to go and explain about the library book that you dropped in the mud to someone who can speak a language that you're actually comfortable in?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, but I feel like that's like if you're talking about designing a resource on campus that does that, you'd be in the position of assigning faculty who speak multiple languages to work, you know what I mean? And that's not necessarily like, something that we want to necessarily do.
No, so I'm thinking of this more from the point of view of I spent 3 years working in an urban public library, and we made a point of hiring people for like the checkout desk who spoke the languages that were important in the community, because it just made life easier for everyone.
So you mean just collecting that data basically, right?
Well, having that data and being able, but this is all, blue skies, right? Because in what world are we going to get it through the CSEA system or anything to be able to like find someone who speaks whatever language? But we could look for librarians who spoke specific languages. We could look for all kinds of things. I don't know.
Right.
It's very
but
nebulous.
You're talking about, right, but not, this isn't even aggregate data. This is data that traces back to specific people and things we can ask them to do. And I'll just offer you a little history. After 9/11/2001, the governor kind of ordered campuses to collect data about who spoke Arabic and who spoke Farsi.
Oh, well, that's not a good feeling.
It was chilling.
Yeah, okay.
We have a lot of Iranian faculty across the SUNY system.
And students.
Yes. Well, but I mean, particularly, and it was, yeah. I mean, that wasn't a fun time.
Ugh, I hate it when people use the data for things I don't like.
With that history, people like, well, why do you know who speaks what language and what, and all of that. So I think I think this data would be, we serve this multilingual. It's about what resources you need and what you have to offer the state in economic development as a public university, as part of the social benefit of a public university, So I really like that idea. I think you got to be careful about tracing it back to identify specific people and asking.
Yeah. And one dashboard that I just created that isn't out yet is on legislative districts. So who represents our students and just New York,
changing all the time.
Yeah, that's all we
have
do.
the lines for the next, right?
I actually like that. That's a pretty cool one, actually. I like that idea.
So that'll be released shortly.
Liz, when you integrate, when you talk about like enrollment issues, do you also, I was taking a look at the retention dashboard.
Yeah.
Have you looked at that yet?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how to like read some of that too.
I mean, well, there's this double whammy, right? We have lower student numbers and we're having a hard time retaining them. But, with lower student numbers in a pool overall, you have to accept that we are accepting most people, the vast majority that apply, right? We're not strictly open enrollment, but we're probably have an acceptance rate that's hovering around 80% or so, right? And so when you do that, you're going to expect that your retention rate is going to fall because you're accepting people at the margin that are going to struggle to do college level work, right? I also think there's a whole shakeout with retention numbers and things like this, because what happens is retention graduation rates, you're really looking at someone who matriculates as a freshman and graduates at the exact same place, right, in their senior year, right? And the problem with that is if people transfer, and this is, SUNY wants this seamless pipeline, and when you have it, you could have someone start at Cortland, finish at Oswego or vice versa in 4 years. And in the SUNY system, that's successful. That's success. A student matriculated and successfully received their bachelor's degree in 4 years, but neither Cortland nor Oswego get any credit for that. Because, the Cortland was a transfer, and so they didn't retain them to graduation. And so they're not a part of their graduation rate. But SUNY Oswego's graduate does not reflect people who have transferred in with 30 more hours, right? So like my son's about to graduate in 3.5 years. He will not be in Oswego's graduation rate, and he is not in Clarkson's graduation rate because he transferred. I mean, that's just how, in the common data set, Department of Ed, that's just how we do it, right? And so it's, there's not always a good system to track that. I always thought, and I suspect somewhere maybe in institutional research is the capability to sort of track who students who transfer in with 30 hours, 60 hours, what percent of those are we graduating, in 2 or 3 additional, we could track that ourselves in terms of students that come to us. I don't know that we can follow. That's why some people look at the graduation rate and say, well, why is it so low? And I'm like, because that graduation rate is completely missing students that transfer.
Mhm.
On
You raise a
either
really, you
no
raise a really good,
institution gets credit for a transfer student graduating in 4 to 6 years.
well, I wondered maybe the retention thing could include transfer as a separate category.
Mm.
Well, transfer, yeah. I'm sure we track the retention data for transfer students after their first year and things like that. But
Because maybe that's the way to do that, right? To try to, because I liked what you were saying, that like in this new landscape, we really should be.
it is, and I think retention has gone down. Part of it, you can look at that academics. I think the other problem is, if you believe there's increasing mental health kind of stop outs, but students who started like in the fall of 2020 were often unhappy. My son was unhappy his first year, was kind of miserable. Would he have been just as miserable at Oswego? I mean, maybe because we were closer, he wouldn't have been. But my point is, a lot of people said, I'm going to transfer to a new school because I'm not happy here. Right? I'm not coming back, but maybe they were unhappy because kind of 2021 was not fun. It was not a fun year. I mean, some people I'm sure managed to have fun, but so there's this shakeout, I think, of students leaving, thinking they'll be happier somewhere else, when maybe it was really just the restrictions of the pandemic that was making them unhappy rather than the place, or students, of some distance deciding they wanted to be closer to home as well. I do, and I think, our retention rates from downstate, the boroughs, Long Island, those have always been a little lower, right? Because the distance can people want to travel, they miss home more than they thought, et cetera.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I know we have a goal of 80%, but that is a giant struggle, more so than it was, say, 10 years ago.
I just wondered if like what you were describing as a model could be a specific page.
Oh, so you'd have a dashboard page that really just kind of focuses on the transfer experience.
Yeah, on the weirdness of that, because I think maybe that's going to capture.
That's a great title, the weirdness, the wild, wacky weirdness of transfer students.
Well, because like these pages are models, right?
Right, sure.
So maybe having that weird model in there, it may not be super useful for most things, right? But it would be really telling for like what's actually happening, how you describe, that people are.
Yep.
I don't know. What do you think? What do you think, Anna? Is that something that's doable or?
Yes, I think so. And Debbie's also looking into what's a little trickier, transfers between programs.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely doable. And I think that's a great idea to have that as a transfer experience dashboard. Yeah.
If an institution within SUNY is particularly successful at taking transfers and bringing them to an on-time completion of a bachelor's degree, that's really something to hype. And if it's not, well, no one's looking, so we just won't. Just hide it in the closet over there. We will not create that dashboard. But I'm saying if you find that, that's something to say,
Like what dashboard? I don't remember.
Yeah, dashboard, what? No.
Yeah.
We'll have to destroy this recording later.
Well, thank you so much for the feedback. Please contact me if you have any other questions or thoughts. Really, we're trying to put the data in the hands of people to do what they want with it. So if you're trying to do something you can't do, I would love to help you with it. Or if you want to get some data that you can't get through the dashboard, we're also here to help with it. And thank you for your thoughts on librarians, on student success indicators, languages, transfers, all very good things. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.